Hi everyone, I hope all of you guys are doing well. So today morning I'm going to go ahead and discuss with you all how to study current affairs for UPSC or for any other state PSC exam, for any other entrance exams. And I'm going to exactly tell you not only what to study, how to study, but also what not to study. It is very important because current affairs is such a very big arena when it comes to various topics, the amount of the width, the breadth of this entire subject, it can be endless. So I'm going to tell you exactly what kind of a strategy can you adopt in order to not spend too much time on just current affairs, because proportionally if you look at it, there are more questions from theoretical parts which are connected to the current affairs than direct current affair questions in UPSC exam or many other exams. So it is important that you recognize the difference between what are the important topics, what are the topics that you need to focus on, study, and what are the topics that you need to kind of skim over and just know, and what are the topics that you need to have a strong grip on. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples also while we are going to discuss this today. So hopefully this will be clear to you by the end of this particular class. So first of all, what to study? Very simple. There are only three sources that you can potentially study current affairs from. Number one source is going to be your newspaper. Number two source is going to be any current affairs magazine. I'm going to tell you which ones I feel are good. And number three is going to be internet, how well you can Google, how well you can look for online resources in order to clarify your doubts. So the first one, when it comes to newspapers, there are two worthy newspapers that you should look at when you are thinking of finalizing what you want to take up for current affairs newspapers for your UPSC or any other exams. The first one is going to be Indian Express and the second one is going to be Hindu. When it comes to Indian Express, I personally find Indian Express to be really great at compiling various issues that are in news. One of the strengths of Indian Express is that its editorial sections are very good, very diversified. They get views of different people from across the board, from policy making to technology to economics to business to arts and culture. So it is very good breadth and kind of this whole spectrum of experts they get to talk about various issues. So I think that's why. And even the information that is there in their environment section, in their business section, is pretty relevant, and they break it down in a nice way. They structure it in a nice way. Hindu newspaper is traditionally something that a lot of aspirants have been using for UPSC. It is a great newspaper. Again, I don't think there is very vast difference between the two when it comes to information. You're going to get all the information that you need in both the newspapers. Personally, I prefer the Indian Express today, but if you prefer the Hindu, go for it. But only one newspaper. Don't do more than one newspaper. Now, how to study the newspaper? That is important, right? When it comes to how to study the newspaper, it is important for all of you to understand the newspaper. When you're starting as a new aspirant, it is going to take a lot of time to study the newspaper. In fact, it might take you 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, or the entire day to even get a hold of the newspaper, because it is a very big document and there are a lot of things that are there. So slowly, first of all, see, if you're fighting that battle, that in beginning it is taking too much time and you're getting demotivated. So first of all, don't worry. You're not the first person in the world to have been facing this. In fact, a lot of aspirants, a lot of people face this problem of taking too much time with newspaper. I have made a very specific video on newspaper. I'm going to write it in comments so that you can access it in order to clarify your doubts. But as far as newspaper is concerned, it will take you approximately 1.5-2 months to get to a point where you are only spending 1 hour, up to 1 hour on the newspaper per day. And I think that is more than enough. In fact, you should not be spending more than 30 minutes on the newspaper per day. And why do I say that? I say that because there are a lot of sections in the newspaper which you will realize are absolutely useless, or there are kind of news that are absolutely not relevant to the UPSC paper at all. So when you look at the old PYQs of UPSC, when you look at the current affairs questions that have come into UPSC, or when you look at the syllabus of UPSC, you will realize that a lot of topics from newspapers you can skip. For example, you can definitely skip any kind of news related to politics, related to criminal activities, related to city level news that comes in newspapers. Almost 30% of the newspaper is from there. Then another 20-30% of the newspaper is ads, so obviously that space is out. So you only have 30-40% newspaper that you have to actually read and spend your time on. So what are the topics that you want to be careful about when you're reading from newspaper? See, you want to be careful about when you're reading anything about the environment, any species, any particular important plant or animal species, any particular discoveries, any particular new climate change policies, anything that is related to the environment in that sense, any unique things that have been recently found or highlighted. For example, UPSC tends to ask questions related to any kind of plant or animal species from exotic locations like Andaman Nicobar, Arunachal Place, which are far off places which normally appear in the newspapers also. So you want to make a list of that. See, it's not necessary directly from newspaper it will come. It might be something related to that. So for example, international affairs. In international affairs, lot of news was coming about coups in Africa that were happening. Also, because there's a lot of instability in Africa, obviously there was a lot of news on Ukraine. So UPSC asked pretty much direct, indirect questions related to these in the prelims last year. So you have to be aware of these things, and you have to also have second order thinking. You also have to think laterally, in the sense that directly question will not maybe come from there, but related to that. So you have to prepare like that. So similarly, from business and economic section, there is some news about interest rates, there is some news about inflation, there is some news about some kind of a fiscal or monetary policy. You should understand the theoretical aspects of these, and also then understand how this is related to current affairs. So for example, right now there is a downturn in China. China is facing certain economic problems. It is not growing. So you want to understand what are the reasons that might be behind that, and how that affects the rest of the world, how that affects supply chains across the world, how that affects India's capabilities to deliver to the world. So for example, right now China +1 is being talked about, that some countries will emerge as alternatives to China for supplying various products across the world. Major exporting countries, emerging exporting countries, these could become. So you want to of course understand that, and understand that in Indian context also. Alright, so this is how you study for your current affairs when it comes from newspapers. Only relevant topics that are related directly to UPSC syllabus or to PYQs. Once you go back and forth to PYQs and the syllabus and the actual newspaper, you will understand that. But hard work to karna padega. It will take you at least 1.5, 2 months to understand. It will take you some coverage of the static syllabus also to understand what I'm talking about very clearly, because just saying and trying to relate it is not going to be easy. You have to do it, and then only you will realize it. Okay, now that is how you study the newspaper. Now secondly, I'm going to go ahead and discuss with you how to study the current affairs magazine. Important, definitely something that is that you should study when you are preparing, because it will help you to concisely go over a lot of information that you might have otherwise seen in the newspaper, but you have not been able to kind of remember it or understand it. Or even in current affairs magazines, they give explanations or they point out the facts. So it is important for you to go through them. So I think, for if you look for mains preparation, Vision's compilations are probably one of the top in the market. You can pick those up. And if you look at prelims, from prelims perspective, or you can just pick Vision for both, that is all right also. But if you look from prelims perspective, I personally liked Insights also, Insights IAS, and I also liked GK Today. Any one of those is fine, because they give you facts also, very small facts related to defense, related to space, related to science and tech, lot of which actually appear in the prelims sometimes. So I would say for prelims, you can decide between one of these two. And for mains, go for Vision IAS, because you need more explanation, more fundamental understanding of topics, which will be given in the current affairs magazines of Vision. Now, after you have chosen, now how to study? See, normally I did not study these on a daily basis. Current affairs magazine, what I used to do was, I used to print it out at the end of the month. Let's say May hai. In May 2023, there was a particular, this month, I studied the newspaper throughout the month. And then after that, what I would do is towards the end of the month. In fact, the current affairs magazine of that month comes 1 month later, 15-20 days later. So I would just download it next month, say in June or the end of the month, whenever it is available. And then I would actually go ahead and study it then. And I would give it 3-4 days and complete it off in one go. And that would give me a lot of kind of focus on that, I would also be able to revise what I had read in the newspaper, and then accordingly I would be able to make changes if I was taking any notes, or just write down on the corners of the magazine. See, when you are studying current affairs magazine, you have to realize that it is foolish to make notes from the current affairs magazines, because that will be a lot of work, that will take a lot of time. So it would be better that whenever you are reading newspapers, just make very short notes on important topics. Just write that, like let's say you come across an important species that has been discovered, just write down the name, just write down the context in 2-3 lines. And when at the end of the month you are reading the current affair magazines of that month, then when you are revising, you will find that news item most likely in the current affairs magazine, and then from current affair magazines only you can cover it. So for revision purposes, for notes purposes, everything, current affair magazine becomes sufficient to actually go ahead and study. You don't have to do much outside that at all. Alright, try to skip very news items which are not relevant for UPSC. You can skip things like, obviously it is important for general knowledge, but things like, a lot of times that a particular person has been declared the commander or a particular brigade or something like that. These small news also come in the newspapers. These are not important because these are not national level issues. These are just postings, or these are just like administrative changes that are happening. So a lot of these kind of news you can actually skip from current affairs, but you will only find that out. I've already explained it. You will only find that out when you yourself study PYQs and the syllabus, and once you do that for 1 to 3 months, you study some static part, then you will understand ki kaun sa you have to leave out and which ones you have to study, which ones are more important to study. Alright, so that is how you approach it. Now after current affair magazines, what is the third source? The third important source is going to be Google, proper Google searching. What I mean by that is, a lot of times what happens is, there are issues that are in current affairs, but there are some theoretical issues attached or related to them. So we need to always go back to the internet and clarify our doubts or understand those static topics also. And they will never be covered in coaching classes. They will never been covered in other things. You have to cover them yourself. You have to put this extra work, hard work into it. Otherwise, nahi ho payega. So what you want to do is, you want to go ahead. For example, let's say there is a mention of a particular term, important term related to environment or economics. Let's say in economics there is a term marginal utility, that shows up in the current affairs. So you want to go ahead and Google it, because it will be difficult for you to understand any particular article that is mentioning that particular term. You want to Google it and read basics about it, understand basic about it. You don't need to go in too much detail, so that you can make a context and you can be able to understand that particular article or that particular topic that is being talked about in the newspaper article. See, a lot of times what happens is, we are mindlessly studying even without realizing that we are not understanding those particular topics or those particular important concepts that are behind these current affairs. So for example, let's say you are reading about G20. Now, unless you understand the little bit of history of G20, what is the point of studying about G20, like what happened in India this time? It is important what happened in India, but you have to go back to the history of G20. When was it established? What was the whole concept? Who were the initial members? All the evolution of the G20 you have to go ahead and read. And what better place than internet, than the actual website of G20, then the Wikipedia page of G20, or any news related to G20 when you do the Google search, and then you figure out what is happening in India. How is the Delhi Declaration different from other declarations? That is important, because that is the kind of question that might appear in the UPSC exam. Alright, so this is how overall you organize, you study for your current affairs. Last word of advice is, and last word of caution is, current affairs can be a very big portion of the entire UPSC studies, but don't make it, because theoretical questions are more important and they are of greater proportion in the actual exam than the current affair questions. Current affair questions related to theoretical aspects or theoretical aspects related to those current affairs will always appear. So your both sides have to be strong, but your theoretical side, your static portion of the syllabus that always we talk about, has to be more strong than the actual current affairs portion. Alright, so that is the word of caution. Don't end up spending too much time in just current affairs, but you have to be overall looking at all the different subjects, all the topics, and especially the static part. All right, hopefully this video today helped you out. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Happy to answer them for you. Good luck. Take care. Bye bye.